good? Beautiful, beautiful. It's only Thursday. Hope you're all still hydrated and moving. After this, I'm just taking a nap forever. I'm Alexander Bevier. I'll be your moderator today. Welcome to the Failures, Flops, and Layoff panel. It is an industry survival guide discussing layoffs, dry spells, and flops. With me today, we have Marie Bilodeau, Jennifer Brozek, and Bevier. I didn't introduce people this way. I got applause there.
Well done, yeah.
Thank you. So, this is going to be a fairly loose, open conversation. We're going to talk some sensitive stuff where we have failed, where we have thought we were going to succeed and make $1 million and made far less than that. And it's going to be a fairly open chat, I think. So, I guess, I can go down the line and we can introduce ourselves a little deeper in terms of what we've worked on. I work in I'm on the committee for the Writers' Symposium here. I work with the IGDA's game writing group. I tend to spend more time in the video game design space, largely making game development easier. I most recently shipped the custom avatar feature on Pokemon Go, and I'm working on an encyclopedia of game narrative design. In discussing failures, flops, like one of the interesting things that I think is interesting to talk about is I will ask everybody to share a flop in some meaningful way, shape, or form, so we can start generating that right now. One for me was I worked on a choose your own adventure style game on Amazon Alexa based off Jurassic Park. It was awesome, but we're dealing with the fact that A, nobody knew that there were games on Alexa, and B, the people who said Alexa play Jurassic Worlds like we had in the trailers did not know what they were getting. So it became a huge issue in our first couple of days when nobody was converting to actually buying more than chapter 1, which was free, because they just did not know what this was, and people were turning off in 30 seconds. So we rapidly had to rewrite the entire first chapter with the same audio we had recorded, and just get as much info in that first 30 seconds as possible to tell people. And it became a very interesting lesson on how to make a new, a familiar genre, choose your own adventure, but work on a platform that nobody even knew that games were on. And with that, I will pass our storyline down the road.
Introduce myself and mention a flop right away?
Yeah.
Forever associated, shall I be with this flop?
We've all made cool things, I promise.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about it out of the room.
I have to pick a flop. There's been a couple. My name is Marie Bilodeau. I am from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I'm very happy to be here.
My wife's from Perth.
Oh, really? I love Perth. What a lovely place. Lovely. We have good people all around us. I'm an author, storyteller, TTRPG writer, short story writer. I do a bunch of stuff. My flop I'm going to talk about right now. There's so many to choose from. I'm going to go with not naming names. Not naming names. There was this really cool company who was working on expanding one of their really cool products to have this entire TTRPG world with it, and I was brought on board to help develop it, and so many really cool concepts developed, and a whole novel written for the world building, and it's been a few years and nothing has happened. I don't know. It's just kind of a flop in that I did the work but nothing to show for it or to mention. So that was a bit unfortunate, and maybe someday it will come out, but not to my knowledge. So that is an unfortunate industry reality.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at the dry spell, where it's not that you weren't getting work, it's that you had work and it exists in that ether.
Yeah. What are you working on?
A lot of my writing, I'm Jennifer Brozek. I am a full-time author, editor, and media tie-in writer. I've been doing this full-time for over 17 years. Just recently got my second Scrap Award for my young adult Shadowrun book.
I'm sorry, did you say young adult Shadowrun book?
Yes.
It's awesome.
I write young adult Shadowrun, young adult Battletech, and adult Shadowrun.
That is sexy.
Along with all my other stuff. One of the problems that I had was I won a silver Emmy for a book called Shanghai Event Apocalypse. It was one of those contracts where I got paid royalties, and I was guaranteed, oh, sorry,
I'm like, what is,
apparently,
who's
it-
drumming
It's
downstairs?
background music.
that
It's a good
is,
story.
that is my 4 o'clock, hey, look. And it's been going on for 5 minutes.
Nice.
I was like, whatever they're doing downstairs, just keep doing it.
Yeah, party on.
It was quote unquote guaranteed that I should get a certain amount of money. And it did win an award. And I got no royalty reports. I never got paid for it because they're like, well, it just didn't sell. So I wanted a company an award, and I was very proud of, I wrote named 70,000 words. And this was actually before I was in SIFLA, because they didn't count game writing as writing at the time. I made it my mission to get game writers into SIFLA after that, once I became a member. But it is a bad thing to get paid on royalties only. And it is a bad thing to get paid, this is the other flop, I don't know. I wrote a novel with Margaret Weiss called Dragon World Adventures that was payment on publication. You can guess where this particular thread is going. They decided not to publish it. I wrote 64,000 words in 8 weeks. And I made nothing. So that was a lesson learned on, you can write a lot of things. Sometimes you get paid for it, sometimes you don't, and it still cannot go out. So that is a reality of writing, especially tie-in writing or writing for role-playing games or video games.
I am Ben Riggs. I'm a TTRPG journalist and historian. I wrote a book called Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons and Dragons, which is essentially about the game's Silver Age and how the first company to make D&D, TSR, almost died in the late 90s and was saved by Wizards of the Coast. I'm going to say, I'll just group my entire career before this book into the flop category, and say that it was 15 years of trying to get a novel published and not getting a novel published. In a thumbnail sketch of writers I've met since my book got published, it sounds like I have the longest run of failure of anyone I personally have met. So yeah, if things aren't working out, just keep plugging away. Although I will also throw in there, maybe switch genres, because that's what sure worked for me. I will casually throw out, it seems like the market is thirsty for nerdy nonfiction. The D&D audience alone, in 1999, Wizards thought there were like 2 million people playing D&D. In 2022, there were probably 10 million people playing D&D. As of last year, the D&D cookbook sold 200,000 copies. So if you feel like you have a nerdy story in your heart, now might be the time to look into that. And I feel like as the almost token nonfiction guy in a lot of seminars, I need to like make a pitch to people and be like, hey, try some nonfiction. You know, maybe it'll turn things around for you.
When people get into writing, I'm like, if you're doing it for the money, go nonfiction.
Yeah. My first, the only book that I have with my name on the cover is Barnes & Noble's Official Guide to the Nook.
Nice.
I got royalties, it's sold. Not selling in the last 14 years, but you know what? I got it out there. I was in college, and it paid for my MacBook, so I can't complain.
That's awesome.
So with that, sort of failures, in terms of dry spells, you said 15 years of not getting stuff moving forward. What do we think is what is the longest sort of dry spell we feel like we've had? Because I've gone 2 years without being able to sell something or to find work outside of game or outside of my space.
I don't think I qualify for this because when I quit my very high-paid tech job, decided to quit and write for a year to see if I could do it. I had 3 things going for me. My parents said, and this is the worst thing they could have said, well, if you fail, you can come home. I love my parents dearly, but no. Two, as a gamer and living in the San Francisco Bay Area and having, I guess you could call it an exotic life, I started writing erotica. And I discovered back in the 2006 era, 2005, if you could string a sentence together and actually be sexy, you could be successful. I wrote 330,000 words and sold 150 of them that year. I have not stopped writing and or publishing and or editing since. So my dry spots are things like when my father died, I had writer's block for 6 months. But I write my own stuff and I write for tie-in stuff, so I don't not work. I do this full time. So I don't have a dry spell.
Can I ask a name of one of your erotic novels that
Nope.
you would recommend? Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
Absolutely not. She is completely separate from me because I write young adult. And what would happen from when the parents come and say, oh, here's this name. Let me see what else she writes.
Oh.
Oh.
No, I'll buy that from
You
you.
can't read that anymore. I separated that because I was learning to write. And, I came up with my own rules, like you could be blunt or vulgar, but you couldn't be at both. If you were both, you were porn. If you're not both, you're erotica. It's dumb. It's true. So,
Sorry,
yeah.
what were the two things?
You could be blunt,
Oh,
or you could be vulgar with your language.
but you can't be both.
You cannot be both. If you go into both, you're porn. If you do one, you're erotica. That is a personal rule that I came up with, and it was fairly successful. So,
I buy that. I think Jen and I have very similar ways here, because whenever I don't have an industry contract, or I'm not working on something, I self-publish some of my stuff too. So I've got right now I had 2 active pen names. I shuttered them both last year, but I'm still doing the marketing towards them, right? I'm still doing, and if I don't have an industry contract, the money's got to come in from somewhere else. So then I just increase my marketing towards my self-pub titles so that I make more money with them. That much, which you think would continue if you don't pay attention to the marketing. It does not. So I think the dry spells are a little bit different. Sometimes though it is for me the dry spells are more along the lines like I'm not getting enough money for those months. Like there's no, the contracts are going to start in fall or something, in summer, like just as an example. And like right now my money that I'm bringing in just from my self-pub isn't enough to even sustain the marketing that I'm trying to run right now. So like those dry spells happen when there's not an influx of money, because the freelance for me is my influx of money and the self-publishing is my constant fund.
and the difference between writing fiction and having these dry spells and being a freelancer who does many different jobs is the silo effect. So you could be having a dry spell in, have I sold a short story lately? But you're writing novels, you're editing novels, I owned a small press for a while. I am now one of the new editors at large for Catalyst Game Labs. We got Augment open. I have an open call, by the way.
Yay! And it's really cool.
So you can follow me on social media. You can see where it is because I don't have the URL memorized for the call.
Right, awesome. And I think that's obviously solid advice, sort of.
Yeah.
We're going to discuss layoffs basically in the next hand, but in between layoffs, I kind of learned that I could say I'm unemployed and job hunting, or I'm freelancing, how can I help you?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm looking for work all the time, and people can just say, yes, you can help me, and I'll figure out how to make you give me money for that later. Sort of in that just like snowball of it's easier to get work when you have work, and it's fairly easy to pitch a journalism article here and there. Like, it's good to have a most recent, oh yeah, I was published in Game Developer X many months ago. At this point it's been a year, but I was most recently published in Game Developer a while ago. So yeah, let's sort of discuss layoffs briefly. Sort of how do you manage when the work suddenly ends? just to like pull it more into a freelance level of things?
I mean, I've always had a day job. I teach 7th and 8th grade.
Sorry.
I was born to do it, ironically. Like, the 7th and 8th grade has a 90% washout rate after 5 years. After 5 years, like 90% of teachers stop doing it. But I would say the most miserable years of my life, outside of like family deaths, were 7th and 8th grade. And I think if Dr. Freud sat down with me, he would be like, every year you get to relive those years and make them better for kids and make sure they have an experience that you didn't have. So it's one of those really, like, it just seems to be like the thing I was like born to do in a really weird way.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so that's my day job. And again, my book is doing well, but I'm not planning on quitting anytime soon. And plan A is definitely have this job and write 1,000 words a day.
Nice.
For me, when I have a dry spell, that's where I start. I either start pinging the places I want to work, do a whole bunch of follow-ups. I have Rolodexes, if you would remember what those are, of physical business cards, like a lot. And sometimes I will just go back to somebody that I knew way back when. Like Elisa Teague, I wrote something for one of her nonfiction collections. And I was like, hey, how you doing? And we started talking, and then I'm like, by the way, I have something I would like you to do. And then she started working for me. That's the thing about publishing. It's small. Everybody will eventually work with everybody else. So be nice. The toes that you step on today may belong to the ass you kiss tomorrow. that is an old phrase. It's not very politic, but it's true. I call it just be nice, share the love. But the big thing I do is I start looking at my want to projects. I want to do this weird thing. I want to tell a story through 24 physical letters. It took me 3 years to get to the point where I did a Kickstarter for it and funded it. It is the weirdest thing ever. You're literally getting 24 letters from me, one every 2 weeks. And it took me 3 times to just get my agent to understand what it is that I was doing. She's like, I could sell that to New York. I'm like, no, you couldn't. The overhead alone, they would just, no. But
It's a lot of stamps.
yeah, it's $1,500 in stamps.
Wow.
Ask me how I know.
No, I think I figured it out.
It's just one of those things. When you have a dry spell, I say keep writing and go after those projects that are weird and nobody else would ever want them and nobody else would ever pay you money. Oh, I got $8,000 in the Kickstarter for this. But it took me 3 years to get to that point. So lean into your weirdness, and the good kind of weirdness. For those of you who are not US, apparently weird is a bad term now.
Oh, it depends on who's getting called weird.
It's true. I don't mind being considered weird because I am. I'm a writer. I'm allowed to be.
Yeah.
So what about you?
I think, just considering the layoffs, I think one of the things I want to point out to, and this is something freelancers don't talk about a lot, because there is definitely a one-way relationship often where the money flows, right? It flows from someone to you. You are actually allowed to fire your clients.
Mm-hmm.
It's that they will not understand it and you will take a financial penalty, and there are different ways of doing it. But if they're costing you your mental health, your joy, your well-being, make a plan, make a budget, and then you can fire them. I give you permission right now. You can fire the clients without destroying your career whatsoever. I fired many a client, some of which still come back to me and ask for that help. And I agree. There's go back through your Rolodex. Just see who have you worked with in the past. Who would you like to work with again? You don't need to work with everyone again. I used to have a speakers bureau before pandemic, where I was a speaking agent, basically. I had a bunch of cool cool speakers, and I would I love negotiations. It's like so much fun, like what can I get from you? And I went from like having a successful 6-figure business to having nothing overnight because of the pandemic, which is fine. I shuttered everything. I wasn't gonna fight that hill. Like it was too much of an uphill battle. There weren't enough uphill battles, so I shuttered the thing. And then with the recent dry spell, I had one of my speakers contact me again, just out of the blue. He's a weather hunter for. Like he hunts tornadoes, he's been in volcanoes, like so he's a TV personality. And he just sent me a text and he goes, I need, like, what would it take to get you to represent me again? And I'm like, and I thought about it, so I left him hanging for a couple of days just so he could panic, but he was probably in a tornado flying up or something, so it's okay. It's fine. He likes it.
She's going around and viewing the reception at one part of the tornado.
Yeah, he's waiting for my text while he's flying. And so like I went back and like I offered like basically like I'll take the same fee, I will do the same things, but I will not reopen my business. So like, you have to do these parts now because I'll not reopen it, but I will negotiate. And like I was like, this is like, I used to do a lot more for the same amount of money. But like, honestly, I'm not doing it again without that again. And he came back, he's like, yeah. He's like, because even with your cut, I'm still going to make a lot more because you're going to negotiate it, you're going to organize it, like you're worth it. So he was over the moon. And it was like kind of a nice thing to like, it's a piece of like a thing I did in the past. During a dry spell, he came up, I thought about it, I said, you know what, let's do this, why not, let's have fun. And it got me excited, which was a good way to look at it. But I was getting to the point where I reached out to 2 or 3 other people that I was like, in the past you told me you were working on a thing, and that's how I got contracts. I just reached out, I didn't say like, hey, you got anything? I was gonna say, how are you doing? I know you had long to go, we haven't talked in a little while, checking in, how's life, and then that resolved into contracts because they needed the extra help, and here I was, just being nice. So yeah, that helped a lot.
Sort of as I said earlier, like the best freelancing advice I've picked up is just asking people, how can I help? Like, that gives them an opportunity to go, well, what do I need extra hands for?
Exactly.
But every so often, they don't have help. And sort of I want to discuss how do we keep spirits up and keep going through some of the hardships. Because I know that sometimes the book falls through or you don't get that job you want. And then the self-hatred comes in because it's horrible, you were really banking on this, you love that work, and that work is now shuttered forever. How do you get back on that bike and how long, I don't ask how long it takes, but, sometimes it can take a while to get back at the computer and start typing. Like I've taken a month off just because I did not want to look at my word processor at all. So how do we keep going?
Vast seas of arrogance.
Just reject failure, embrace hubris.
Well, I'll briefly say, at the beginning of my career when I was getting rejected, I would look around and be like, I don't think I'm as good as other writers. So this kind of makes sense. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep writing and improving. Because the problem is I'm not as good as them yet, which makes logical sense, so that I'm not getting published, so you just keep plugging away. Then I got to a point where I'm like, I think I should probably be good enough to be getting published. And at that point, the confidence kept me going of like, I just need a break of some sorts, just keep rolling the dice, and eventually you'll hit the target, was my thinking. So I guess when I wasn't as good as other people, that encouraged me to get better. And then when I felt I reached parity, I'm like, well, it's just a matter of time, was my thinking.
Well, one of the things I will tell you as an editor, and I've edited over 25 anthologies now. I'm going to be editing this Shadowrun magazine. Editors want to publish you. They do. But they want the story that fits their need. So one of the things I do, especially when I'm feeling uninspired, I will talk with other editors and I'll say, what kind of story have you always wanted but never gotten? That's how I got into one of the Jim Butcher anthologies. I can't remember the name of it.
Something Hearts, isn't it?
Oh, Heroic Hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said, I never get stories about old witches or hags. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And I knew the other editor, and she was like, all right. give me a story. You gotta make it good, but get me a story. And the first time I wrote for her, I wrote on spec, which was Westward Weird. She called me, pro tip, no editor will ever call you to tell you that you will never work again. Because she emailed me and she's like, I hate everything about this story. Here are all these things I really hate. I like this one person you killed off. Let's talk. And she's like, let's set up a call. And I was just like, oh my God. She's going, this is Carrie Hughes.
Oh, right.
She is going to just basically tell me never to work in this industry ever again. This was about 2009. So I got on a call and she's like, okay. Can you take the story off of train and stick it in a carnival? And I was like, yes, yes I can. I know nothing about carnivals, but yes I can. And then I did the smart thing. I said, why do you want it in a carnival? What is it about the carnival that you want? So when you are not inspired and when you are having all these failures, my advice to you is to be curious, is to be open. And also to talk to other writers who get it, because this is a weird industry. It is hard to create all the time. I get inspired. Marie is one of my best friends. I see her, I game with her, but she lives in Canada and I live in Seattle. I mean, this is like one of the very few times we get to see each other, and it's like so energizing. I get so inspired, and we just talk about. Who knows what we talk about? There was the Great Poutine War earlier. No, seriously, there was actually a whole thing about poutine, and Elvis started a war with another author. It was really cool.
Poutine should bring us together, Jennifer.
Yeah, like gravy, the mess of fries.
Yes, but she was talking about spaghetti, the Italian poutine. Yeah, to an Italian.
It was amazing. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
So, but I want you to be inspired and I want you to be curious. When I was grieving the death of my father while writing a book about the loss of an entire academy full of kids losing their parental figures and their school, it took me about 6 months to get back to writing, and what it took was me talking with another military writer who started to ask me questions. So he was curious, which opened me up. So be curious, be kind, and talk to other people. Don't be super insular.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we do Pokemon Go raids together, I'm usually the furthest traveled when she invites me, because I'm like many kilometers away. Anyway, yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that really helped me with this career was I started, so much rejection.
There's a lot of rejection.
So much rejection. But I started my, my like 9-to-5 career when I had one of those 10 years ago, like it ended 10 years ago. But I worked in nonprofits in Canada. So Ottawa, for those of you who don't know, is the national capital. So there's a lot of government, a lot of nonprofits, right? A lot of like things that are based on funding and project, and like the second that funding goes, so does your job. So like I have multiple instances where the funding dried up, and then like you're gone by noon. Like there's just no more money. They're tightening down, and I get it. Like it's not personal. It is very much fiscal. And what I do is I made this rule with myself. Like this was like I worked in communications, and like in my, I think I was 24 or 25, and I just lost a job I loved. It was for the Canadian Council of Professional Engineers. And it was like you would get these applications from people wanting to become Canadian, and they wanted their credentials recognized in Canada because it was part of the immigration, process. Thank you. And which was lovely at the time because it was a good job for me. I enjoyed it. It was great. You got to talk to people around the world because if the documentation was incomplete, And I got the immigration laws changed. It was passed, and then that was no longer part of the process, so like I lost my job that afternoon. It was really fun because it was during Antrax time, so we had like little gloves and anyways, mail from around the world. And so I lost my job, and that was when I think I was 24 or 25, and I made myself a rule. I am allowed to pout. Like I have a pounding time and wine, and it depends on, that period of time is entirely dependent on when I need to get moving. So in this case, I needed to get my resume fixed and like up by end of day so that the next day I could start hitting the ground. Because the internet wasn't quite as big. It was still something, but you know, I had to go see places. I had to like do the thing. I had to contact placement agencies and all that. So I gave myself until 2 p.m. It was like around 10:30. So I gave myself, I went for a winey lunch. I called my best friend, I whined. I called my other best friend, I whined. I called my other best friend, I whined. I called my mom, I whined. And then once I was all cried out and whined out, at 2 p.m. came around and it was all business again. Like, get your resume done. What do you want to do next? Where are you going to go? What are the placement agencies? So, and I still do that with writing.
Yeah.
It's like if I get a rejection, I get like, oh, I can whine for an hour or two. But usually it's like 5 minutes now because I got shit to do, you know? I go upstairs. My partner works in the home, so I can go upstairs and then I can grab a very fluffy cat because we have 4 of them, and then I'll just hug it and then I'll sit down. And she'll be like, what's up? I'm like, I just got a rejection for that thing. And she's like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm like, yeah, me too. Do you want to touch the feet? And then we touch the feet, we count the feet, and then I get back to work. So like, it's a very like, it's shrunk down, right? But it's a ritualized almost. Ritualized whining is okay. Like it's fine, in fact. You can hug cats or people.
Yeah, I will tell you, rejections will continue to happen no matter.
All the time.
Like 1 year, one story, I rejected Sean McGuire, Ed Greenwood, and Mark Tempo from the same thing. And not because the stories were bad, it was because they didn't fit. And I hate sending rejections, but it's part of the job. Like I said, I've been doing this for 17 years. I just now, in this last 2 or 3 months, got my 100th story sale.
Ooh.
So think about that. 17 years, 100 acceptances. So it is a job predicated on rejection. It's not personal.
Do you keep track of your rejections? Because I know some people like post them on the wall.
I used to, and then I was like, you know what, I don't need that negativity in my life.
Yeah, no, I used to have a spreadsheet, but decided I don't want that
I
thing.
mean, I do, if I really wanted to, because I have a yearly score sheet. And I'm too old to redo it, because otherwise if I started it again, I would just do it by short story and then rejection, acceptance, rejection for reprint, sold for reprint, you know. Now I just do it by year, so I have to actually go back and look and see, did I send this to analog 3 years ago?
What I do with my tracking, I do a monthly report, and instead of doing rejection, I just say like submitted to. So I always track the market as submitted to. I don't say they rejected it, but suddenly the story is submitted to another, and like 3 months later, like so it was totally rejected, but I don't record the
No, I
rejection.
actually, every year, if you went to my blog, at the end of every year, I put the cold hard numbers. What is my acceptance rate? And my acceptance rate is a little artificial now because I'm invited into anthologies because I am established, and once you get established, you know, you still have dry spots, but things are a little easier, but you still get rejected. I got rejected from Uncanny just recently, which was kind of sad.
Well, let me tell you where you weren't rejected.
Oh, yeah.
In Interdimensions, the GenCon Writer Symposium Anthology. If you haven't picked up a copy yet, we have them for sale just down the way there. It is a phenomenal book. Jennifer is in it, and many, many other fine writers. We also have a USB drive with even more fine writers in here, also with a bunch of books, some poetry. I think there's a game in here. Is there some music? I think there's some music.
There's music.
Yeah, there's some
And
music in
Cat
here.
Rambo course.
Yeah, full Cat Rambo course. Like, this is.
Can I tell my story?
Oh,
about
please
that?
go ahead and upsell.
So I am not upsell. It's going to be not an upsell. It's a great anthology. Though, so
Wait, I'm not in it. I'm just selling it.
Oh, good. So great anthology, and I'm on the committee as well. I didn't make it in. So I sent too much of an experimental story, so it didn't fit the editorial vibe, and I got rejected. I was like, ooh, okay, because it's, you know, I was like, okay, so who do I send it to that would like an experimental story? Because it was, and now it's on hold with a market, with another market who's, you know, it's a really good visibility market, so I hope I get in, but it's on hold with them, but it wasn't personal. Like, I know the editor, I think she's amazing, you know, I know most of the people in it. Like, Jen has a story, and I find just for that.
My story, Eye of the Beholder, was actually co-written with Raven Oak, and It had, I think, was rejected 15 times. And then it's a lightly magical realism crime story involving the Fremont Troll, if you know who that is.
Woo!
So
I used to go past him to work every day. I love it.
yeah, I love that. But it didn't fit the vibe for the other places, but it found its
Exactly.
market because
Exactly.
you keep doing. I recommend you to help with the inspiration. Every story you write down the 5 places you're going to send it to, or the 10 places.
Mhm.
So when it comes back to you, because it will, most likely, you immediately, you look at what they say, you take it with a grain of salt.
And then you send it off.
Yeah, because
Yeah, and that's what I did exactly. That's what I did with that story. It was like, oh, and then when I thought of it, I was like, okay, it's a game narrative designer, it's a gaming con, and you sent them an experimental, really fun, cute. There's a lot of depth and rainbow magic, but 1,000-word flash story that's completely experimental. Like, okay, who else loves that? And I had my list, exactly like Jen said, and I just flipped it right away to the next market because I'm like, okay, that wasn't a fit. Cool, good to know. And then I flipped it to the next market, right? And then it means like I'm so excited about this because this is freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's a great book.
It's a great
Buy
book.
it.
And I
We
want
wanna
to get
get
all my
more.
signatures, right? I want to get the signature page.
yes, there is
but
a signature page.
it's not personal. Even if they're your friends, even if they're like, it's not personal, it's business. At the end of the day, the stories have to fit the book. And that's okay because it opens up new avenues for you because you're like, oh, well, I'm really excited about this venue. And then you go for it. So anyways, yeah.
Yeah. All right. I want to open the floor to questions as we do that and sort of start getting your guys' questions framed. Like it sort of sounds like a lot of the thesis is, we're all square pegs going into round holes. And the more experience and knowledge we have, we know how to shape ourselves when you need to be a round peg to fit in the round hole.
Can
And
we
when you
ask
have the
that?
opportunities to square up. Oh,
I would like to hear a little bit more about the nonfiction thing.
yeah, go ahead, yeah. We'll open the question up here before we open it to you guys.
How would I don't like medium but if I want to get a legitimate, where's an open call for nonfiction that I could just nature or something?
So like you want to write a nature book?
No, Nature the magazine.
Oh, so my experience is I started a podcast about 10 years ago. That led to me writing for Geek and Sundry, and it's flowering.
Okay.
And an article for Geek and Sundry led to the book that I wrote.
Oh, awesome.
So it was the fiction isn't selling, so let's keep going. It reminded me of your siloing idea where you're like, maybe this isn't working out, but you try something else. So that was my road. I will say this: it's gaming journalism is in terrible straits.
Just a little.
I wrote a piece on Gary Gygax's sexism. I couldn't sell it anywhere, and then when I just posted to social media, you got 3.5 million clicks on Reddit.
Which equals how many dollars?
0, exactly 0. Which is why I tried selling it first. But again, I think that it's that the environment is so bad. I'm seen as competition, not a resource. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But there's it blows my mind that when I post to social media, I can prove that I get these electric, fantastic numbers. But then when I go to Polygon or Rascal and I'm like, can I sell something? It's like, nah.
So the medium. Why wouldn't you go to medium?
So I figure at this point, given that I have a book out there, if I'm not going to get, I kind of don't want to run my own thing, which I feel like that's a little bit of medium.
That answers that question.
Yeah, so I feel like if I'm at least posting to social media, I'm maximizing my reach and hopefully helping the sales of my book, and I get paid that way.
Okay.
Did that answer your? I feel like I don't actually know enough to answer your question.
Okay. It didn't really, but it did.
That makes sense.
It did in the fact that you started doing something that you love in a different medium. And I've experimented in podcasting. I am actually Voice Talent on 2 different podcasts. Yep.
What are those podcasts, Jennifer?
Oh, one of them is the Paper Flower Consortium. It is a vampire podcast about basically domesticity with vampires. It's Elizabeth Guzzetti does it. It's amazing. And then I did the Dire Multiverse, and I do Twitch streaming. I do a lot, but I do a lot of things that I like.
And what's your career, Jennifer?
Full-time freelancer, honestly. I am a full-time writer, author, editor, media tie-in writer, but I also game, and I do Twitch, and I do podcasts and voice acting because I enjoy them. But I don't make a living off of any of them. I make a living off of all of them. That's the difference. So, but I'm just really curious about the whole nonfiction magazines and the nonfiction stuff. 10 minutes, thank you.
Yeah, that part is grim, but for those of you just starting out, it should encourage you somewhat in that the demand for like nerdy journalism has not gone away. It's just that the interest of large corporations have realized they can't make $1 billion off of nerdy journalism, which I do think empowers startups essentially. Like, you know, if you're like, well, I really like Shadowrun. Yeah. I am just going to go all in on, I'm going to have a Shadowrun podcast, maybe I'm going to play Shadowrun and stream it. I'm going to go and talk to the creators and interview them, and you're just going to go. I'm of the opinion that eventually, and then A, again, the Shadowrun audience will be like, great, this is the content I want, and then B, that will eventually open doors for you. Again, maybe I'm wrong, I'm not a divine being, but that's what worked for me.
Yeah, games journalism does tend to work cyclically. So every 10 years, you know, blogs become cool, corporations buy blogs thinking they're cool, realize there's no money there, fire everyone, and then they all start new blogs again, and it goes, we're just on a very bad downward spiral with everything else in, you know, the world of money. I had a hand up.
Yeah, you said it might open doors, but like, you've only said things that didn't work, so
Podcast worked.
Okay.
Because podcast, like the Geek and Sundry, and again, you want to write in some way, shape, or form? Yeah. So like, I would tell you, again, podcast builds name recognition, so that then when you start writing articles, people are like, that guy.
It gets you into press events for free.
Yeah, you get free stuff. And again, that name recognition, then hopefully at some point you have a book idea that you can then sell, and the name recognition sells the book. The day before my book came out, my editor was already like, so sequel. Like, you know, all he had was the pre-sale numbers, but the pre-sale numbers were enough that he was like, well, we want to do more of this. We're interested in this. So yeah, my things that work would be, I think it doesn't have to be podcasts, but like produce something that you can put in front of people and they can look at, and make sure it's about something that you care about passionately, so that you're not going to get sick of it in like 6 months. Is that more helpful advice?
Yeah. Also, where does the agent come into this process?
So, briefly, my agenting story would be this. I took 5 years to write my book. About year 3 into the process, I started doing seminars at GenCon. Within a year, these seminars are like packing the room. Like hundreds of people are coming to my seminars on D&D history. And I'm like, okay, I should try and sell this book into the mainstream. I should try and get an agent. I think I sent it off to 100 agents. Everybody rejected me. I just keep writing. I'm like, I have faith that this will work out somehow. Andrews McNeil, the publisher, gets interested in the book, and I still don't have an agent. And I'm like, you know, I'd really like an agent to negotiate this deal with a publisher for me. So now I'm going to agents saying, hey, look, I have a publisher on the hook. You just need to negotiate the contract. And they're like, fuck no.
There are reasons for that. An agent who, I did not have an agent for 10 years. And I gave up on having an agent, and then Jeannie Koch wanted to be in one of my anthologies, and we were at a surfer con. She's like, you're going to have drinks with my agent. And we did, and then she was like, okay, I'll represent you for this one thing. And then send me something else. They do a lot of times on one thing, or they do it on the person. It depends on the amount of work that they want to put into it, because an agent only gets paid if he gets paid. And if he's not a guarantee, even though you have a contract, a lot of people don't want to touch that. And I don't understand it really, because then they have a relationship with you. So, how did you get?
So finally, it was a GenCon Writers Symposium connection.
Woo! Yes.
It was, I'd come to GenCon Writers Symposiums, met some people, and among those people are thank you, Jabberwocky Literary Agency, which has its COO here, and the COO's assistant, James. Hi, James. So, hey, network, get to know people, talk to people. And again, it is in some ways a frustrating story. Well, it was very frustrating to experience. Yeah, because you think, write a good thing, send off a cover letter, hopefully an agent gets you. I think my agent said she gets 300 queries a month, something like that. So again, that face-to-face time, being a person, not a letter, all those things are huge advantages. So hunt down James.
Well, also it's about relationships. Like, my agent won't even accept query letters now. She goes to conventions where she will do the 8-person call, or one of her authors brings someone to her and says, I think you should talk to this person. And that, a lot of agents these days do it that way.
Yeah, it's not just being a good writer, it's about being a decent person.
But you don't need an agent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to have an agent.
I don't know.
My agent doubled everything that I made after she came on board. But in this day and age of publishing, you get to decide what your success is. You get to decide what you want to do. You get to decide, am I going to self-publish? Am I going to do nonfiction? Am I going to do a YouTube channel and then a Twitch channel and a VOD channel and make money that way based on underwater basket weaving, which is actually a real thing, just so you know. You should look it up. And you teach some people some things, and you're really passionate about it. And then somebody says, hey, do you want to write a book about it? And one thing leads to another. But you have to hit the zeitgeist.
One day underwater basket weaving will be the thing. You just gotta know when to start selling it.
I know journalism has books like The Writer's Market, websites like journalismjobs.com for publishing. Are there any great places to look if you're looking for jobs, freelance postings, things like that?
Duotrope, Submission Grinder. If you're looking for an agent, 1000literaryagents.com and agentquery.com. Roland died, so.
Yeah.
So Submission Grinder, Duotrope.
Yeah. Follow some groups. I do some groups in social media and stuff, so that, they'll post like SSF calls, submission calls and stuff like that, like on Facebook and all that. They have those. Those are helpful.
SIFLA and the Horror Writers Association and the Mystery Writers Association and the Romance Writers Association, they all have suggested markets as well.
And if you're looking for anything copywriting too, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a good place to be. That's where a lot of the marketing agencies who are populating the copywriters for certain big companies will hang out. So that's a good place to be too.
And if you have a nonfiction thing if you have a thing that you want to write that's kind of like somebody else, go find out who their agent is and who else they write like, and see if you can cultivate an actual friendship with one of those writers to kind of get in. If you're like, Ben is going to be at this convention. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Jennifer.
You know a lot of nonfiction writing about D&D.
I want your career, so let's have a friendship.
Yeah, let's
We need some role-play scenarios in here. This wasn't on the bio. You're welcome.
What I would like to know is if I wanted to do, if I wanted to meet your agent, or if I wanted to do, you start asking questions. Can I buy you a cup of coffee?
I'm a cheap date, sure.
A lot of people buy me a cup of coffee, or they buy me a Ko-fi, the tip service, because
That's how you pronounce that.
Yeah, that was a very
Like
realistic,
Ko-fi.
Yeah, we just watched Best Friends happen.
Yeah,
This is where it starts.
Yeah. Also, we have Meet the Authors tonight at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
All of us will have books for sale. I will have a book called Industry Talk.
It's really
All
good.
about writing for the role-playing game industry and what the editor thinks about when putting together an anthology. I will have 5 copies for sale. So please come and see us in Wabash 1. You're gonna be there yet?
Yeah.
You're gonna have your books there?
No.
Oh.
It's in the Imagining Games booth, 458 in the main hall.
Okay.
All right. And with that, we have 1 minute left. If we have a 1 second question or a 1 minute question. Yeah.
At what point do you give up on your darlings and move on to pitching something else to other people?
More darlings you have, easier to toss them, or easier to sell them.
Yeah, I usually go from like, when I send out something to like pitch it, or I try to like sell it, I usually move on to the next project so I'm writing something, I pitch it, and then while it's in the pitch process, I move on to doing the next thing, and then that becomes my darling, because again, the more darlings you have, the more you sell.
Yeah. Once
So
it's
I
out
fall
of-
in love
yeah.
with that, and
Once
then,
it's out of my hands, it's dead to me.
And no
They
writing,
might come back and I'll love it again, but not now.
yeah, no writing is ever wasted. You just create a hiatus folder, and you will take that story and put it in the hiatus folder, and then you will discover 5 years later, somebody will come to you and say, do you happen to have a story about a Weird West story? And I'll be like, wait, I had that story. And you go back to your hiatus, you're like, oh, this is a little rough, but let me fix this up. And you can say yes, but no writing is ever wasted. Put it in your hiatus folder. You can come back to it.
yeah. You don't know where the market's gonna go, where the demands are gonna be, so your darling's not dead. It's just
Yeah.
sleeping.
It's like food, and eventually you end up with a drawer of cool stuff,
Yeah.
which is also new.
Yeah, I can be an ugly darling for a little bit, and then it'll be able to become beautiful later.
A swan darling, a swan darling. All right, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being on this wonderful panel.